Emma Rodriguez pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the social worker's sedan, watching the endless Texas scrubland blur past in shades of brown and dust. At 16, she'd learned that life had a cruel sense of timing. Her parents died in a car accident when she was 8. Her grandmother raised her until last year, when cancer took her too. And now, her grandfather, a man she'd met exactly twice in her entire life, had died 3 weeks ago, leaving her as his sole heir. The irony wasn't lost on her. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. She'd spent 8 years in foster care, bouncing between homes, never quite fitting anywhere, and the one blood relative who could have claimed her had chosen not to, until death forced his hand. "Almost there, Mrs. Patricia Chen," said from the driver's seat, her voice carrying that practiced gentleness social workers used when delivering news that ranged from disappointing to devastating. Redemption, Texas. Population 847. Emma didn't respond. She'd learned that silence was safer than hope. Her duffel bag sat at her feet, containing everything she owned in the world. 3 changes of clothes, a battered laptop her last foster family had given her, her mother's wedding ring on a chain, and exactly $247 in cash she'd saved from part-time jobs at various fast food restaurants. The town appeared suddenly, as small Texas towns do, rising from the plains like a mirage. Main Street stretched for maybe 6 blocks, anchored by a grain elevator on one end and what looked like abandoned movie theater on the other. Buildings wore their age like badges of honor or shame, depending on your perspective. The courthouse stood at the center, its limestone facade cracked and weathered, a Confederate monument out front that probably sparked more arguments than reverence these days. Mrs. Chen pulled into the parking lot of Martinez & Sons Legal Services, a converted house with peeling white paint, and a hand-painted sign that had seen better decades. Inside, the air conditioner fought a losing battle against the August heat. A receptionist who looked about 100 years old glanced up from a typewriter, an actual typewriter, and smiled. "You must be Emma Rodriguez," the woman said, her voice surprisingly warm. "Mr. Martinez is expecting you. Can I get you some sweet tea?" Emma shook her head, following Mrs. Chen down a narrow hallway lined with photographs of Redemption's history. Oil derricks dotted many of the black and white images, suggesting the town had once mattered to someone, somewhere. Roberto Martinez was younger than Emma expected, maybe 40, with graying temples and kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. His office was organized chaos files stacked on every surface, a fan oscillating in the corner, and a window air conditioning unit that rattled like it was plotting revenge. "Miss Rodriguez," he said, standing to shake her hand. His grip was firm but not crushing. "I'm sorry for your loss." Emma had heard those words so many times they'd lost all meaning. She simply nodded and sat in the chair he gestured toward. Mrs. Chen remained standing near the door, a silent observer to whatever came next. Martinez pulled a thick folder from his desk and opened it with the careful movements of someone handling something fragile. "Your grandfather, Miguel Rodriguez, was complicated. I won't pretend otherwise. But he was my client for 37 years, and I'd like to think I understood him. At least a little. He didn't want me," Emma said flatly. "When my parents died, he refused custody. So whatever this is, whatever he left, I don't really care." Martinez's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Understanding, maybe, or pity. "Your grandfather was 78 when he died, lived alone on the edge of town, ran a gas station that hadn't pumped fuel in over 30 years. Most people thought he was just another stubborn old man hanging onto something worthless because he didn't know better." He paused, pulling out a document. 3 weeks before his death, Miguel came to this office and made me promise something. He said, "Roberto, when I die, You make sure my granddaughter understands. You make her listen to everything. Don't let her walk away until she knows the whole truth." Emma felt her throat tighten. Why should I care about his truth? He had 16 years to tell me anything. He chose silence. He chose protection. Martinez corrected gently. Though you're right to be angry. What I'm about to tell you will seem impossible. But I have documentation for every word. And I think, by the end, you'll understand why your grandfather made the choices he did. Mrs. Chen shifted near the door. Mr. Martinez, if this involves anything dangerous or inappropriate, it involves an inheritance, Martinez interrupted, his tone respectful but firm. An inheritance that Miguel Rodriguez spent 40 years protecting from people who would have killed him and anyone. He loved to get their hands on it. Emma's pulse quickened despite herself. What kind of inheritance? Martinez pulled out a survey map, spreading it across his desk. The paper was yellowed, dated 1969, showing a plot of land on the outskirts of Redemption. Approximately 15 acres, including what was labeled as Rodriguez Gas and Service. Your grandfather bought this property in 1969 with money he'd saved working oil rigs across West Texas. He built the gas station himself, ran it for 12 years, made enough to live on, not much more. Then, in 1981, he suddenly closed the station, stopped pumping gas, but kept paying the property taxes, kept the utilities on minimum service. For 40 years, he maintained that property while living in a trailer on the backlot. Why? Emma asked. Martinez pulled out another document, this one newer, covered in official-looking stamps and seals. Because in 1979, 2 years before he closed the station, a geological survey team did exploratory drilling in this area. They were mapping underground formations, looking for potential oil and gas reserves. What they found beneath your grandfather's 15 acres was significant, very significant. He slid the document toward Emma. The technical language was dense, but certain phrases jumped out. Proven reserves, estimated recoverable barrels, commercial viability excellent. I don't understand, Emma said, though her hands had started to shake slightly as she held the paper. Let me translate the geology into plain English, Martinez said. Beneath the land your grandfather owned sits an underground oil formation. Not a giant deposit, but substantial. The original survey in 1979 estimated approximately 2.3 million barrels of recoverable crude oil. At today's prices fluctuating around $85 per barrel, that's roughly $195 million in crude oil. Emma's vision blurred slightly. She blinked, certain she'd misheard. That's not possible. There's more, Martinez continued, his voice steady. The same formation also contains natural gas reserves, approximately 12 billion cubic feet, worth another $48 million at current market rates. But the real value isn't in the oil and gas themselves. It's in the mineral rights. He pulled out yet another document. This one, a property deed with handwritten notations in the margins. When your grandfather bought this land in 1969, he bought it from the Hartley family estate. The Hartleys were old money, dating back to the cattle baron days. They'd held on to this particular parcel because it had sentimental value. It was where the family patriarch first struck oil in 1923. Martinez pointed to a specific clause in the deed. The Hartleys sold the surface rights to your grandfather, but they retained the mineral rights, which was standard practice. Except, he pulled out a yellowed letter, its edges crumbling. Except that Edward Hartley, the last surviving member of that generation, signed this letter in 1977. It's a codicil to his will, stating that upon his death, all mineral rights held by the Hartley estate would transfer to the current landowners of properties they'd sold as a form of restitution for what he called economic exploitation of working families. Emma's mouth had gone dry. That's unusual, unprecedented, actually. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Edward Hartley was a complicated man guilty about his family's wealth, apparently. The letter was filed with the county but never properly executed, because Hartley died suddenly in 1978, and his executors buried the document, probably to protect the estate's value. Your grandfather found out about it in 1979, when he was researching property records after the geological survey. Martinez leaned forward. Miguel spent 2 years quietly building a legal case. He hired lawyers from Dallas, paid them in cash, told no one in town what he was doing. In 1981, a judge ruled that Hartley's codicil was legally binding. The mineral rights to your grandfather's 15 acres transferred to him, along with mineral rights to 6 other properties across the county. The other landowners sold their rights immediately, got paid, moved on. Your grandfather refused every offer. Why? Emma asked again, though this time the question felt heavier, weighted with implications she was only beginning to understand. Because the major oil companies offered him pennies on the dollar. They knew what was under his land, and they tried to pressure him into selling cheap. When he refused, things got complicated. Mrs. Chen stepped forward. Mr. Martinez, what kind of complicated are we talking about? Martinez's expression darkened. The kind that involves brake lines being cut. The kind where a man's house burns down under suspicious circumstances. The kind where your wife gets followed home from work by men in trucks with no license plates. Emma felt her blood chill. My grandmother? Your grandmother, Rosa, was terrified. They had a young son, your father, Carlos. Rosa begged Miguel to sell, to take whatever money the oil companies offered, and leave town. But Miguel had grown up poor, watched companies exploit his family and neighbors his whole life. He'd finally gotten something of real value, and he was determined not to let them steal it. Martinez pulled out a photograph. Miguel and Rosa Rodriguez, young and smiling, standing in front of the gas station. Miguel's arm was around Rosa's shoulders, protective, proud. Emma saw her father's features in Miguel's face, saw her own eyes in Rosa's smile. In 1983, Martinez continued, Rosa gave Miguel an ultimatum. Sell the rights and leave town, or she would take Carlos and go without him. Miguel chose his pride over his family. The words hung in the dusty office air like an indictment. Emma felt something crack in her chest, understanding flooding through her with painful clarity. They divorced, she whispered. My grandmother left him. Rosa moved to Houston, changed her last name, raised your father alone. She made Miguel promise never to contact them, never to bring the danger that followed him into their lives. He kept that promise. When your father got married, Miguel wasn't invited. When you were born, he wasn't told for 3 years. Emma's anger returned, hot and sharp. So he chose money over family. That's supposed to make me sympathetic? He chose to wait, Martinez corrected. Miguel never sold those mineral rights. Never touched that oil. For 40 years, oil companies came with offers. $5 million. $10 million. Eventually up to $50 million. He turned down every single one. Do you know why? Emma shook her head, not trusting her voice. Because he was waiting for the market to change. Waiting for technology to improve. Waiting for the day when he could lease the drilling rights on his terms to companies that would pay fair value and follow environmental regulations. But more than that, he was waiting for you. Martinez pulled out a ledger, its pages filled with Miguel's careful handwriting. Every month for 23 years, your grandfather set aside money in an account. Money from odd jobs, from selling scrap metal, from a small military pension. He saved $127,000 by the time you turned 18. He intended it for college, for starting your adult life. He updated his will every year, always naming you as his sole heir. Tears Emma had been fighting spilled over. Then why didn't he come for me when my parents died? I was 8 years old. I needed him. Martinez's voice softened. Because the threats hadn't stopped. The oil companies still wanted his land, and they weren't above using leverage. Miguel was terrified that if you came to live with him, they'd use you to force his hand. He thought you were safer away from him, even if that meant living in foster care. He thought. Martinez paused, his own voice thick with emotion. He thought he was protecting you. Emma wiped her eyes roughly. He was wrong. Yes, Martinez agreed simply. He was wrong, and he knew it, toward the end. That's why he made me promise to tell you everything. He wanted you to understand, even if you couldn't forgive him. Mrs. Chen approached, placing a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder. What exactly is Emma inheriting? Martinez turned to a fresh page in his folder. Miguel's estate consists of the following: 15 acres of land, including the gas station building and his personal trailer. Physical assets total approximately $85,000 after debts. The college fund of $127,000, and the mineral rights to underground oil and gas reserves, currently valued at approximately $243 million. The number seemed to suck all the air from the room. Emma couldn't process it, couldn't make it real in her mind. It was too large, too impossible. However, Martinez continued, there's more. In the past decade, hydraulic fracturing technology, fracking, has revolutionized oil and gas extraction. It's now economically viable to access reserves that were previously too difficult or expensive to reach. 3 months before his death, Miguel finally agreed to lease the drilling rights, not sell them. Lease them to a company called Apex Energy Solutions. He pulled out a contract, thick and official. The lease terms are favorable. Apex pays a $20 million signing bonus, plus 25% royalty on all oil and gas extracted. Industry projections suggest the full extraction will take 15 to 20 years and generate approximately $277 million in royalty payments. Combined with the signing bonus and the current value of the mineral rights themselves, your grandfather's estate is worth approximately $520 million. Emma's knees felt weak. She was glad she was already sitting down. The first royalty payment, $8.3 million, was deposited 3 weeks ago, Martinez added. The money is currently sitting in a trust account, awaiting probate clearance. Mrs. Chen had gone pale. Mr. Martinez, this child is 16 years old. This is an extraordinary situation. It is, Martinez agreed, which is why Miguel's will includes specific provisions. Emma cannot access the full inheritance until she turns 21. Until then, the estate will be managed by a trust, with myself as primary trustee, and you, Mrs. Chen, as secondary trustee if you're willing. He turned to Emma. You'll receive a monthly allowance of $10,000 for living expenses, education, whatever you need. The college fund is immediately available for approved educational expenses. When you turn 18, you'll get access to $2 million to establish your adult independence, buy a home, start a business, whatever you choose. At 21, you inherit everything, full control, no restrictions. Emma's voice came out barely above a whisper. This isn't real. This can't be real. It's very real, Martinez said. But Emma, you need to understand something crucial. Your grandfather spent 40 years protecting this inheritance, and the people who wanted to take it from him haven't gone away. The day the Apex lease was signed, several major oil companies filed legal challenges, claiming the mineral rights transfer from the Hartley estate was invalid. They're arguing that Edward Hartley's codicil should be thrown out, that the mineral rights should revert to the current Hartley heirs, who would then be forced to sell to the highest bidder. Can they do that? Emma asked. They're trying. We have strong legal standing. The 1981 court ruling is solid. and we have decades of Miguel's clear ownership to point to. But these companies have deep pockets and expensive lawyers. They're going to fight this. And it could get ugly. Mrs. Chen crossed her arms. What kind of ugly? Martinez met her gaze squarely. The kind where a 16-year-old girl, with no family and no protection, becomes a very attractive target for pressure, manipulation, or worse. Emma felt that familiar cold feeling settling into her stomach, the one that came whenever she realized how powerless she was. But this time, something else stirred beneath it. Anger. The same stubbornness she'd seen in that photograph of her grandfather. "They're not taking it," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "My grandfather spent his entire life, gave up his family to protect this. I'm not letting some oil company steal it because they think I'm an easy mark." Martinez smiled, and it was the first time Emma had seen genuine warmth in his expression. "Miguel said you'd say something like that. He said you had Rosa's fire and Carlos's heart. He hoped that would be enough." "It will be," Emma said, though she had no idea if that was true. Over the next hour, Martinez walked them through the practical details. The property was currently vacant, maintained by a local handyman Miguel had paid monthly. Emma could live there if she wanted, though the trailer was small and the gas station building needed work. Alternatively, the trust could pay for her to live elsewhere, maybe with a foster family willing to take in a teenager with unusual circumstances. "I want to see it," Emma said suddenly. "The property, the gas station. I want to see what he was protecting." Martinez nodded. "I think that's wise. It'll help you understand." They drove out of town in Martinez's truck, Mrs. Chen following in her sedan. The landscape opened up as they left Redemption's small downtown, revealing the vast Texas plains that stretched to every horizon. Oil pumps dotted the distance, their rhythmic nodding like mechanical birds pecking at the earth. After 15 minutes, Martinez turned onto a gravel road marked by a faded sign. "Rodriguez Gas and Service, 2 miles." The road was rough, rattling Emma's teeth, lined with mesquite trees and prickly pear cactus. Then the property appeared. The gas station was smaller than Emma had imagined. A single-story building with adobe-style walls, now cracked and faded. The old gas pumps still stood, their analog displays frozen at prices from 1,981. Weeds had claimed most of the lot, pushing through the concrete, nature slowly reclaiming what man had abandoned. Behind the main building sat a small trailer, probably 30 feet long, with rust stains running down its sides from a leaking roof. A satellite dish sat incongruously on top, the only sign of modern technology. "This is it?" Emma asked, unable to hide her disappointment. "This is what he gave up everything for?" Martinez turned off the engine. "What you're seeing is the surface. What matters is underneath." They walked the property, Martinez pointing out boundary markers, explaining where the old wells had been drilled for the geological survey, describing how modern drilling would work: horizontal wells extending underground from a central pad, following the oil-bearing rock layers. "Apex will set up their equipment over there." He indicated a flat area near the property's eastern edge. "They'll drill down about 8,000 feet, then horizontally for about 2 miles. They can access the entire reserve from that single location, which is why your grandfather's lease terms were so favorable. The actual surface disturbance will be minimal." Emma tried to imagine it. Millions of barrels of oil flowing through pipes beneath her feet, money generated from Earth that had waited millions of years to surrender its treasure. It still didn't feel real. Mrs. Chen had been walking the perimeter, examining the buildings. Now she returned with a troubled expression. "Mr. Martinez, the trailer door is unlocked, and there are fresh tire tracks near the road." Martinez's face hardened. "Stay behind me." They approached the trailer carefully. The door hung slightly open, and Martinez pushed it wider with his foot. Inside was chaos. Drawers pulled out, cushions slashed, belongings scattered. Someone had searched the place thoroughly, violently. When did your handyman last check the property? Mrs. Chen asked, her voice tight. 3 days ago. He said everything was secure. Martinez pulled out his phone. I'm calling Sheriff Brennan. While they waited for the sheriff, Emma wandered through the destruction. Her grandfather's life, such as it was, lay in ruins around her. Simple things. Clothes, books in Spanish, a hot plate, instant coffee. He'd lived like this for 40 years, in this small metal box, guarding his secret. Then, Emma noticed something. In the corner, beneath an overturned chair, a section of the floor didn't match the rest. She moved the chair and saw a cut in the linoleum, carefully concealed, but now revealed by the vandal's search. Mr. Martinez, she called. There's something here. He came over, examined the floor, then used his pocket knife to pry up the section. Beneath was a small compartment, maybe 2 feet square. Inside sat a fireproof box. Martinez pulled it out carefully. The box was locked, but after examining it, he said, I have a key for this. Miguel gave it to me years ago and said I'd know when to use it. He produced a small key from his wallet and opened the box. Inside were documents, photographs, and a thick envelope with Emma's name written on it in shaky handwriting. Emma took the envelope with trembling hands. The paper was heavy, expensive. She opened it carefully and found a letter, several pages long, covered in her grandfather's distinctive script. Mi querida Emma, it began. My dear Emma. Sheriff Tom Brennan arrived 20 minutes later, a tall man in his 60s, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent his life under the Texas sun. He examined the trailer with practiced eyes, taking photographs, dusting for prints, though everyone knew it was probably futile. Same thing happened to the Morrison place 2 months ago, he said, speaking to Martinez while carefully avoiding looking directly at Emma. Old man Morrison had been sitting on some mineral rights, similar situation to Miguel. Someone broke in, tossed his house, didn't take anything valuable, just searched. Looking for documents, Martinez said. Property deeds, lease agreements, anything that could be used to challenge ownership. Brennan nodded. Morrison got spooked, sold his rights to Titan Oil for about 1/3 of what they were worth. Figure that was the point. Now he did look at Emma, his expression carefully neutral. You're the Rodriguez girl. I'm Emma, she said, meeting his gaze steadily. She'd learned in foster care that showing weakness invited trouble. Heard you inherited Miguel's place. That's gonna make you real popular around here. His tone was flat, impossible to read as friendly or threatening. Is that a warning, Sheriff? Mrs. Chen asked, stepping closer to Emma. It's a statement of fact, Ma'am. This is a small town. Word travels fast, and there are people with a vested interest in seeing that land change hands. My job is to keep the peace and enforce the law. I'll do both, but I can't be everywhere at once. Are you saying she's in danger? Mrs. Chen's voice had gone hard. Brennan took off his hat, wiped his forehead. I'm saying she should be careful. Lock her doors. Watch who she talks to. Don't sign anything without a lawyer present. Same advice I'd give anyone who suddenly came into money around here. After the sheriff left, Martinez suggested they return to town. Emma clutched her grandfather's letter, unread, waiting for a moment alone to absorb his final words. Back in Martinez's office, Mrs. Chen made phone calls to her supervisor, to various state agencies, navigating the complex bureaucracy of what to do with a minor who'd suddenly inherited a fortune. Emma sat in the corner, finally opening the letter fully. Miguel's handwriting was shaky but legible, the words clearly chosen with care. My dear Emma, if you are reading this, I am gone, and you know the truth about what I left you. Not just money, money is nothing. What I left you is a choice. The same choice I faced 40 years ago. I could have sold the mineral rights in 1981. Rosa wanted me to. We would have gotten maybe $500,000, enough to live comfortably, raise your father in security. Instead, I chose pride. I chose to fight. I told myself I was standing up for what was right, refusing to be exploited by powerful companies who thought they could bully a simple mechanic into accepting pennies. But the truth, Emma, is that I was also afraid. Afraid that selling would prove I was weak. Afraid that taking less than full value would mean all those years of struggle building the station, earning respect, making something of myself would mean nothing. So I fought. And I lost everything that mattered. My wife, my son, the chance to know you, to watch you grow, to be the grandfather you deserved. By the time I realized my mistake, too much time had passed. The threats were real, I wasn't paranoid. People had died over mineral rights in West Texas. I convinced myself you were safer away from me. But I know now, that was cowardice dressed up as protection. I saved money for you. I watched your life from a distance, getting updates from people I paid to check on you without revealing who I was. I knew every school you attended, every foster home you stayed in, every time you were moved. Each report broke my heart a little more, knowing I could have prevented your suffering but lacked the courage to try. The money I'm leaving you is cursed, Emma, not in a supernatural sense, but in the way all large fortunes are cursed. They reveal who people really are. They invite envy and greed. They make you question every relationship, every kindness. But the money is also an opportunity. You can do what I couldn't. You can refuse to let it define you. You can use it to build something better than I did, something that honors your parents and grandmother instead of betraying them. The oil companies will come for you. They'll offer you amounts that seem huge, $50 million, $100 million, maybe more. They'll tell you that fighting is foolish, that you should take the money and live your life. They'll pressure you, maybe threaten you, definitely try to manipulate you. You have every right to sell. I won't judge you from beyond the grave. If you take their money and never think of me again, I'll understand. You owe me nothing. But if you choose to fight, to keep what's rightfully yours, know that you're not alone. Roberto Martinez is trustworthy. I've tested him over decades. He'll guide you. The lease I signed with Apex is solid. I made sure of that before I got sick. Most importantly, know that you're stronger than I was. You've survived things I never faced, losing both parents, living without family, making your own way. That strength will serve you now. I wish I could apologize in person. I wish I could explain face to face why I made the choices I did. I wish I could know you, really know you. Not just read reports from private investigators. But wishes are for fools and cowards, and I've been both. All I can give you now is money and a choice. Make it yours, not mine. Con todo mi amor y todos mis lamentos. Your grandfather Miguel. Emma read the letter 3 times, tears flowing freely by the end. The anger she'd carried into Martinez's office had transformed into something more complex: grief for what could have been, rage at circumstances beyond anyone's control, and a fierce determination not to let her grandfather's mistakes define her future. Mrs. Chen noticed her tears and approached gently. "Emma, are you all right?" "No," Emma said honestly, "but I will be." Over the next week, Emma's life transformed in ways both practical and profound. Martinez arranged for her to stay temporarily with the Johnsons, a local family who'd known Miguel and were willing to provide housing for a generous monthly fee paid by the trust. Their home was comfortable, their 3 children boisterous but welcoming, and Mrs. Johnson's cooking was the best food Emma had eaten in years. But comfort came with complications. News of her inheritance had spread through Redemption like wildfire, despite Martinez's attempts at discretion. Everywhere Emma went, people stared, some with curiosity, some with envy, some with calculation. The first offer came on her 3rd day in town. A man named Gary Sutton, representing Titan Oil and Gas, approached her outside the grocery store. He was smooth, mid-40s, expensive suit, incongruous against Redemption's casual atmosphere. "Emma Rodriguez, I'm Gary Sutton. I was wondering if I could have a moment of your time." Emma had been warned this would happen. "I'm not discussing business without my lawyer present." Sutton smiled, showing perfectly white teeth. "I respect that. Smart girl. But I'm not here to pressure you. I just want you to understand your options. May I buy you a coffee? Just a conversation, no commitments." Against her better judgment, Emma agreed. They sat in the town's single diner, Emma drinking Dr. Pepper, while Sutton ordered black coffee he never touched. "Your grandfather was a stubborn man," Sutton began, his tone carefully sympathetic. "Admirable in many ways, but stubbornness often leads to tragedy. He spent 40 years fighting Emma. 40 years of stress, isolation, losing his family. And for what? So that, at the end of his life, he could sign a lease with Apex that will take 2 decades to fully pay out." "The lease pays well," Emma said, repeating what Martinez had told her. "It pays adequately," Sutton corrected. "But there's adequate, and there's life-changing. Titan Oil is prepared to offer you $180 a million cash, right now, for the full purchase of your mineral rights. Not a lease, not a royalty stream that might or might not perform as projected. Real money, liquid, immediately accessible once you turn 18. The number made Emma's head spin. $180 million. She tried to imagine that amount, tried to picture what it would look like, what she could do with it. "Why so much?" she asked. "If the rights are only worth what Apex is paying, why would you offer more?" Sutton's smile widened slightly. "Because we can extract the resources more efficiently. We have better technology, more experience, established infrastructure in this region. What would take Apex 20 years, we can do in 10. Plus, we're willing to pay premium because, frankly, your legal situation is complicated. The Hartley family claims are weak, but they create uncertainty. Titan is prepared to assume all legal risk, all fighting with the Hartleys, all the headaches. You get your money, no questions asked, no waiting, no worries." It sounded good. Too good, Emma's instincts whispered. "I need to think about it," she said. Of course. Sutton pulled out a business card, heavy stock with embossed lettering. "But Emma, think about this. You're 16 years old. You've been in foster care most of your life. This money could give you everything you've never had. Security, education, opportunity. Your grandfather made his choice. Now you get to make yours. Don't let his stubbornness become your prison." That evening, Emma told Martinez about the encounter. His expression darkened. $180 million is an insult," he said flatly. "The mineral rights are worth at least $520 million in total value, probably more if oil prices continue rising. They're betting you don't know that, betting you'll see a large number and jump without doing the math. But $180 million is still life-changing money," Emma said. "More than I could spend in a lifetime." "It is," Martinez agreed. "And if you want to sell, that's your right. But sell for the right price, on your terms. Not because some oil company executive thinks you're an easy mark because you're young and alone." The words stung because they were true. Emma was young and alone. And people like Sutton knew it, counted on it, planned to exploit it. "What would my grandfather do?" she asked. Martinez was quiet for a long moment. Miguel would fight. But Miguel also died alone, estranged from everyone he loved, after 40 years of stress destroyed his health. "I won't tell you to be like him. I'll only tell you to be yourself, whoever that is." Emma spent that night in the Johnsons' guest room, staring at the ceiling, thinking about choices and consequences. She'd spent 8 years watching other kids get adopted, watching families form without her, wondering what was wrong with her that made her unwanted. Now she had money, more money than she could comprehend, and people who'd never noticed her suddenly couldn't look away. The anger she'd felt reading her grandfather's letter returned, sharper now. Miguel had chosen pride over family, fighting over love, money over connection, and it had destroyed him. But was selling any better? Was taking Titan's offer, knowing it was designed to cheat her, any different than what Miguel had fought against? Would she just be surrendering to the same exploitation her grandfather had spent his life resisting? Emma thought of her mother, who she barely remembered. Her father, who'd worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat. Her grandmother, Rosa, who'd raised her father alone, after refusing to accept Miguel's choices. None of them had been rich. All of them had been strong. That strength was her real inheritance, Emma realized. Not the money, but the stubbornness, the refusal to be pushed around, the determination to stand up, even when standing up was hard. The next morning, she called Martinez. "I'm not selling. Not to Titan. Not to anyone. My grandfather spent 40 years protecting this. I can spend 5 years waiting for the lease to pay out." She could hear the smile in Martinez's voice. "Are you sure? Because once you turn down Titan's offer, they'll get more aggressive." "I'm sure," Emma said. "Let them come." They came that afternoon. Emma was walking home from the library when a black SUV pulled alongside her. The window rolled down, revealing Gary Sutton, his smile notably absent. "Emma, get in. We need to talk." "I don't need to do anything," Emma said, continuing to walk. The SUV kept pace. "You're making a mistake. Titan's offer is generous. More generous than you deserve, frankly. Your grandfather stole those mineral rights through legal manipulation of Edward Hartley's confused final wishes. The Hartley family has retained our legal team to contest your ownership. This will get ugly." Emma stopped, turning to face him. "Then it gets ugly. I've survived ugly before." Sutton's expression hardened. "You're a child playing in an adult's world. You think you're tough because you've been in foster care. You think that prepares you for what's coming. Titan has lawyers who've been doing this longer than you've been alive. We'll tie up your inheritance in court for decades if necessary. You'll turn 18, 21, 25, and still be fighting. Is that how you want to spend your youth? Fighting over something you'll never live to enjoy?" Fear snaked through Emma's chest, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "If I have to." Sutton stared at her for a long moment. Then the window rolled up. The SUV drove away, leaving Emma standing alone on the sidewalk, her heart pounding. She called Martinez immediately. He listened to her description of the encounter, his silence heavy. "They're playing hardball," he said finally. "Threatening litigation, trying to scare you. It's a standard tactic. Will they actually sue? Probably. But Emma, listen to me carefully. They won't win. The 1981 court ruling is solid. Multiple judges over 40 years have affirmed your grandfather's ownership. The Hartley heirs tried this before, in 1985 and again in 1999. They lost both times. Titan knows this. They're hoping you don't. Then why threaten? Because litigation is expensive and time-consuming even when you're right. They're betting you'll decide the hassle isn't worth it. That you'll sell, just to avoid years of legal fighting. It's a war of attrition. Emma thought about that. How much will it cost to defend? The trust can cover it. That's part of what it's for. But I won't lie, it'll be stressful. Depositions, court appearances, constant pressure. And you're still in high school. You should be thinking about prom and college applications, not mineral rights litigation. I should be thinking about a lot of things I don't get to think about," Emma said. "That's life. Tell me the truth, Mr. Martinez. Can we win?" "Yes." "Then we fight." The lawsuit came 2 weeks later. Hartley, Family Trust, Vers, Rodriguez Estate, filed in federal court, challenging the validity of Edward Hartley's 1977 codicil and seeking to void the 1981 judgment that transferred mineral rights to Miguel Rodriguez. Emma sat in Martinez's office, reading the complaint with growing disbelief. The Hartley lawyers argued that Edward had been suffering from dementia when he wrote the codicil, that he'd been unduly influenced by socialist sympathies, that made him want to redistribute family wealth, that the document was improperly executed and should never have been given legal weight. "This is garbage," Emma said, looking up from the pages. "Expensive garbage," Martinez agreed. "Titan is funding this case, providing the Hartley family with top-tier corporate lawyers. They're throwing every argument they can think of against the wall, hoping something sticks. What do? We fight. We file a response. We provide evidence. We depose witnesses. We do exactly what Miguel did in 1981, except this time, we have 40 years of established precedent on our side." The next 6 months were the hardest of Emma's life, and that was saying something given what she'd already survived. School became a gauntlet of whispers and stares. Some kids were friendly, drawn by her sudden notoriety. Others were hostile, resentful of wealth they thought she didn't deserve. Most just avoided her, uncertain how to relate to someone whose life had become a headline. The Johnsons remained supportive, but Emma could feel the strain. Their youngest daughter, Ashley, asked constantly about the money, about what Emma would buy, about whether she'd still go to public school once she was rich. Mrs. Johnson tried to curb the questions, but Emma saw the curiosity in her eyes too. The legal proceedings ground forward with bureaucratic slowness, depositions, document requests, expert witnesses, evaluating Edward Hartley's mental state decades after his death. Martinez handled most of it, but Emma had to sit for her own deposition 6 hours of Titan's lawyers asking questions designed to make her seem incompetent, childish, unworthy of such wealth. "Do you have any experience managing money, Miss Rodriguez? Do you understand the technical aspects of oil and gas extraction? Have you ever held a job for longer than 6 months? Isn't it true that you've been expelled from 2 schools for behavioral issues?" That last one made Emma's blood boil. Yes, she'd been expelled once for fighting with a girl who'd been bullying a younger kid, once for skipping school to work extra shifts when her foster family was threatening to kick her out if she didn't contribute more to household expenses. But the lawyer made it sound like she was a delinquent. Martinez objected to most of the questions, but the damage was done. They were building a narrative. Troubled foster kid. Unstable, incapable of handling serious responsibilities. Someone who would waste or lose the inheritance without proper oversight. "They're trying to get a conservator appointed," Martinez explained after the deposition, arguing you're not mature enough to make decisions about the estate. If they succeed, a court-appointed manager would control everything until you turn 25 or even longer. Can they do that? Not easily. The trust already provides oversight, but they'll try anything. The pressure mounted from unexpected directions. Classmates' parents approached her with business propositions. A cousin she'd never met showed up claiming family ties and needing a small loan of $50,000. The pastor from Redemption Community Church suggested she might want to donate to the building fund. God's work requires earthly resources. After all, everyone wanted something. Everyone had an angle. Emma withdrew further, spending lunch periods in the library, walking home alone, avoiding conversations that might lead to another pitch or scheme. Mrs. Chen checked in weekly, concerned about Emma's isolation but unsure how to help. How did you teach a 16-year-old to navigate sudden wealth when you'd never experienced it yourself? Then, in March, something changed. Emma was sorting through a box of her grandfather's belongings that Martinez had retrieved from storage, mostly papers, some tools, a few photographs. At the bottom, she found a small book, handmade, with a leather cover cracked by age and handling. Inside were poems, written in Spanish, in Miguel's careful handwriting, dated across decades. Love poems to Rosa, odes to the Texas landscape, meditations on regret and redemption, and scattered throughout, poems addressed to Mi Nieta, my granddaughter. Emma's Spanish was rusty, learned from her grandmother before she died, but she could make out most of the words. One poem, dated on her 8th birthday the year her parents died, made her cry. 8 candles I cannot light. 8 wishes I cannot grant. 8 years of watching from shadows. While you grow in someone else's light. What kind of grandfather trades presents for principle? What kind of man values victory over voice? I tell myself I'm protecting you. But who am I protecting you from? Myself, mostly. My choices. My consequences. My pride. Happy birthday, Emma. I hope you grow strong without me. Strong enough to forgive. Strong enough to build better than I did. Strong enough to know when to fight and when to surrender to love. Emma sat on her bed in the Johnsons' guest room, clutching the poem book, finally understanding. Her grandfather hadn't been a villain or a martyr. He'd been human, flawed, afraid, trying to do the right thing and failing, but never stopping trying. The money wasn't cursed. The choices were, and she didn't have to make the same ones. That night, Emma made a decision. The next morning, she asked Martinez to arrange a meeting, not with Titan Oil or the Hartley lawyers, with the other landowners in Redemption who'd sold their mineral rights cheap when the pressure got too intense. There were 11 of them scattered across the county. Martinez sent letters on Emma's behalf, inviting them to meet at the high school auditorium on a Saturday afternoon. 7 showed up, curiosity and suspicion written on their faces. Emma stood on the stage, looking out at people 2, 3, 4 times her age, people who'd lived in Redemption their whole lives, people who'd given up fortunes because they'd been afraid. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm Emma Rodriguez. Most of you knew my grandfather, Miguel. Some of you probably thought he was crazy for holding onto his mineral rights all these years." A few uncomfortable nods from the audience. "I'm being sued right now. Titan Oil, working with the Hartley family, is trying to take away my inheritance. They're arguing that my grandfather never rightfully owned the mineral rights in the first place, that Edward Hartley's codicil was invalid." "We know," called out an older man in the front row, Jim Morrison, whose break-in had preceded Emma's. "Been following the case. Same thing they tried with us. Different tactics." Emma nodded. "Here's the thing, though. If they win against me, they invalidate Edward Hartley's codicil entirely. Which means all the mineral rights he transferred, including yours, could be challenged. The Hartley heirs could argue that your sales were invalid because you never actually owned what you sold." The auditorium went very quiet. "They could come after you for the money you were paid," Emma continued, "or sue you for selling something you didn't own. Either way, it'd be a legal nightmare." "What are you suggesting?" asked a woman Emma didn't recognize. "I'm suggesting we fight together. You, me, anyone else Edward Hartley's codicil affected. We pool our legal resources. We present a united front. We show the court that 40 years of established precedent can't be overturned just because an oil company wants it to be." Morrison stood up. "Little girl, no offense, but I sold my rights for $150,000. That money's long gone, spent on medical bills and keeping my ranch afloat. I can't afford lawyers." "I can," Emma said simply. "The trust will cover legal fees for anyone willing to join our defense. You don't pay a dime. You just show up, tell your story, prove that the codicil was real, and you rightfully owned what you sold." The silence stretched. Emma could see them calculating, weighing risks, wondering if this troubled foster kid could really deliver on her promises. "Why?" the woman asked again. "Why help us? What's in it for you?" Emma thought about her grandfather's poems, about 40 years of isolation, about choosing money over people and regretting it every single day. "My grandfather gave up his family to protect his mineral rights," she said. "He thought he was standing on principle, but really he was just standing alone. I don't want to make that mistake. If we're all fighting the same battle, we should fight together." She paused, then added, "Plus, I really want to beat Titan Oil, and I figure 7 more witnesses showing that Edward Hartley's codicil was legitimate We'll help make that happen." Someone in the back laughed. Then Morrison smiled. Then the woman nodded. All right," Morrison said. "I'm in. Been 40 years since I stood up to those oil company bastards. Might be nice to do it one more time." Within 2 weeks, all 11 affected landowners had joined Emma's legal defense. Martinez worked with them to provide statements, documents, evidence showing that Edward Hartley had been sound of mind, that his desire to transfer mineral rights was genuine and deliberate, that decades of legal and financial transactions had been built on the foundation of his codicil. The case went to trial in June. The federal courthouse in Midland was larger and more imposing than anything in Redemption. Emma sat at the defendant's table beside Martinez, watching as Titan's legal team, 6 lawyers in expensive suits, set up elaborate presentations and document exhibits. The Hartley family attended, sitting in the gallery, looking uncomfortable in their courtroom attire. They were younger than Emma expected, a brother and sister, both in their 30s, who'd probably never thought twice about the mineral rights they'd inherited until Titan offered to fund this lawsuit. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Titan's lawyers argued passionately that Edward Hartley had been manipulated, that his socialist leanings constituted a form of mental instability, that the 1981 judgment had been procedurally flawed. They brought in psychologists who analyzed his writings, handwriting experts who questioned signatures, economists who argued the transfers had been financially irrational and thus invalid. Martinez's response was simpler. He put the 11 landowners on the stand, one by one, letting them tell their stories, how they'd lived on the land for generations, how they'd struggled financially, how Edward Hartley's transfer had given them opportunities they'd never otherwise had: college for their kids, medical care, security in old age. Was Edward Hartley's mind sound when he signed the codicil? Martinez asked each witness. Yes, they all answered. He knew exactly what he was doing. Emma testified last. Titan's lawyers tried to make her seem incompetent, emotional, unworthy. But Emma had been underestimated her whole life. She was used to it. Miss Rodriguez, the lead attorney asked, do you really think you're capable of managing a $520 million estate? No, Emma said simply. That's why I have trustees, financial advisors, legal counsel. I'm not managing it alone. I'm learning, asking questions, making decisions based on expert advice. That's what any reasonable person would do. But you're just a child. I'm a 16-year-old who survived 8 years in foster care, who learned to budget when I had $20 to last a month, who worked part-time jobs since I was legally allowed to work. I've managed more with less than most people ever will. I think I can handle this. The courtroom was silent. Even Titan's lawyer seemed momentarily at a loss for words. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Patricia Alvarez, deliberated for 5 days. When she returned with her verdict, Emma's heart pounded so hard, she thought everyone could hear it. This court finds, Judge Alvarez read, that Edward Hartley's 1977 codicil was executed with full legal capacity and clear intent. The transfer of mineral rights was legitimate. The 1981 judgment properly rendered, and the subsequent 40 years of legal and commercial transactions have established clear precedent. The plaintiff's challenge is without merit. The defendant's motion for summary judgment is granted. Emma sat frozen, not quite believing it. They'd won. Just like that. 3 weeks of trial, months of preparation, and it was over. Martinez squeezed her shoulder. You did it. We did it, Emma corrected, looking back at the 11 landowners who'd sat through every day of trial, supporting her, standing with her. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Emma had been warned about this, the media attention, the cameras, the questions. She kept her responses brief. I'm grateful to the court for recognizing the truth. My grandfather spent 4 years protecting what was rightfully his. I'm glad I could finish what he started. "What will you do with the money?" a reporter shouted. Emma thought about that. She'd been thinking about it a lot lately. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "But whatever I do, it'll be my choice. Not because someone pressured me. Not because I was afraid. My choice." The appeal came 3 weeks later. Titan wasn't giving up. They took the case to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, arguing that Judge Alvarez had erred in her interpretation of the evidence. Martinez was sanguine about it. Appeals rarely succeed in cases like this. They're grasping at straws. "How long?" Emma asked. 6 months. Maybe a year. Meanwhile, the Apex lease continues. Money keeps flowing into the trust. By the time the appeals court rules, you'll be 17, closer to 18. Harder for them to argue you're too young to make decisions. Life settled into a strange new rhythm. Emma finished her junior year of high. School with decent grades, not spectacular, but passing, which felt like victory given everything else happening. She'd made a few genuine friends, kids who'd gotten to know her before they knew about the money, who treated her normally. The Johnsons remained welcoming, but by mutual agreement, Emma moved into a small apartment near the high school that fall. She needed privacy, space to process everything, room to figure out who she was beyond the foster kid or the oil heiress. The apartment was modest. 1 bedroom, small kitchen, barely enough closet space, but it was hers. She hung her mother's wedding ring on the wall in a shadow box. She framed one of her grandfather's poems. She bought books, too many books, filling shelves faster than she could read them. For the first time in her life, Emma had stability. A home she couldn't be kicked out of. Enough money from the trust's monthly allowance that she didn't have to work unless she wanted to. Time to think about things beyond survival. She started therapy, working with a counselor who specialized in trauma. Processing years of loss and instability took time. Patience, emotional labor Emma hadn't known she needed. Some days she cried for hours. Some days she felt nothing. Slowly, incrementally, she started healing. Emma also started thinking about the future beyond just protecting her inheritance. What did she actually want to do with her life? With the money? She visited the property regularly, watching as Apex set up their drilling operation. The process was fascinating, massive trucks bringing equipment, workers in hard hats moving with purpose, enormous drill bits that would bore miles into the earth. The site foreman, a woman named Patricia Chen, took an interest in Emma's questions. "You want to understand the process? Come out here on Saturday. I'll walk you through everything." Emma spent weekends at the site, learning about hydraulic fracturing, about how oil was extracted and refined, about the environmental considerations and safety protocols. Sarah was patient, explaining complex processes in terms Emma could understand, never condescending, never dismissive. "You know," Sarah said one afternoon as they watched the drill team work, "there aren't enough women in this industry. Most people think oil and gas is all roughnecks and good old boys. But the technology's changing. We need people who understand engineering, environmental science, geology, computer modeling. Smart people like you." Emma had never thought about a career in energy, but watching the operation, understanding how her grandfather's land would power vehicles and heat homes across the country, she felt a connection to something larger than herself. "What if I wanted to study petroleum engineering?" she asked. Sarah grinned. "Then I'd say you should apply to Texas A&M or UT Austin. Best programs in the state. With your resources, you could probably get into MIT or Stanford too." College. Emma had thought about it abstractly, but suddenly it felt real. She could go anywhere, study anything. The trust would pay for it. No debt, no financial limitations, just possibility. The feeling was overwhelming and liberating in equal measure. The appeals court ruled in December, 2 days before Emma's 17th birthday. They upheld Judge Alvarez's decision unanimously, adding in their written opinion that the plaintiff's arguments constitute an attempt to relitigate settled matters through different courts, in hopes of finding a more favorable venue. This court will not countenance such forum shopping. It was over. Really, truly over. Titan Oil issued a brief statement, saying they accepted the court's ruling and would not pursue further litigation. The Hartley siblings released their own statement, thanking their lawyers but acknowledging the case was closed. Emma celebrated with pizza and a movie with her small group of real friends. Katie, Marcus, and Jen, kids who'd accepted her for who she was rather than what she had. They didn't talk about money or court cases. They argued about whether the movie ending made sense and whether pineapple belonged on pizza. It was wonderfully, perfectly normal. That night, alone in her apartment, Emma pulled out her grandfather's poem book and read every entry. Love, loss, regret, hope, all of it captured in Miguel's careful handwriting. She wrote her own poem on the last blank page. You left me money, and a choice, and the burden of understanding. That sometimes people fight for the wrong things with the right intentions. I forgive you, abuelo, for the absence, for the silence, for choosing pride over presence. I forgive you, because I understand now that you were just human, and humans are beautifully, tragically flawed. Thank you for the inheritance. Not the oil, not the money, the choice. I'll try to choose better than you did. I'll try to remember that wealth, without connection, is just numbers in an account, and numbers can't hug, or tell you at night, or tell you they're proud, or love you despite your mistakes. Rest easy, abuelo. I'll take it from here. Emma turned 18 in December. True to the trust's terms, she received access to $2 million immediately. The first thing she did was donate $500,000 to Texas foster care organizations, funding scholarships and support services for kids aging out of the system. The second thing she did was buy a modest house in Redemption, not a mansion. Just a comfortable 3-bedroom with a yard. She wanted roots. A place that was truly hers. She applied to 5 universities with strong petroleum engineering programs. She got into all of them. She chose Texas A&M, wanting to stay relatively close to the property. To see the operation through, to understand every aspect of the industry she was now part of. The monthly royalty payments continued to flow in, averaging $400,000. Emma barely touched them beyond what she needed for living expenses and college. The trust invested most of it, building long-term wealth while she figured out what to do with it. 3 years later, at 21, Emma inherited full control of the estate. By then, the Apex operation was in full production. The trust's value had grown to $680 million between continued royalty payments, oil price increases, and savvy investments. Emma sat in Martinez's office, the same office where she'd first learned about her inheritance, reviewing the paperwork that would transfer complete control to her. You sure about this? Martinez asked. You can keep the trust structure if you want. Sometimes it's easier, safer, to have that buffer. I'm sure, Emma said. I've learned enough. I'm ready. Martinez smiled, signing the final documents. Miguel would be proud of you. You kept the inheritance. You grew it. But more than that, you didn't let it consume you the way he did. You found balance. Emma thought about that. I had advantages he didn't. Time, support, people who helped me without expecting anything in return. She paused. I want to pay that forward. Over the next year, Emma established the Rosa Rodriguez Foundation, named for her grandmother. Its mission was to support foster children, fund education, provide housing assistance, and help families in crisis. She endowed it with $200 million, ensuring it would continue supporting people long after she was gone. She kept the gas station property, but transformed it. The old building became a community center, offering free GED classes, job training, computer access. The land around it became a park with playgrounds and picnic areas. A plaque near the entrance read, "In memory of Miguel Rodriguez, who protected this land so it could one day serve his community." Emma graduated from Texas A&M with a degree in petroleum engineering and a minor in environmental science. She was recruited by several major companies but chose to work for a renewable energy startup instead, applying her knowledge to developing cleaner extraction methods and transitioning towards sustainable energy. She still owned the mineral rights. The Apex lease had another 12 years to run, generating steady income that funded her foundation's work. But Emma knew that eventually, the oil would run out. She was already planning for what came next: solar farms on the property, wind turbines, maybe geothermal. The land her grandfather had protected could continue providing value, but in ways that aligned with the future rather than the past. On what would have been Miguel's 85th birthday, Emma drove out to the cemetery where he was buried. His grave was simple. He'd died with almost nothing, having put every spare dollar into the trust for her. She placed flowers on the headstone and sat on the grass beside it. "I wish you could see what I've done with your gift," she said aloud. "I think you'd approve. I hope you'd approve." The Texas wind whispered through the mesquite trees, carrying the scent of oil and earth and possibility. "I'm not going to waste it, abuelo. The money, the opportunity, any of it. But I'm also not going to let it be the only thing that defines me. You taught me that lesson by living it wrong. I'm grateful for that too." She stayed for an hour, telling him about her work, her plans, her hopes. It felt good to talk to him, even one-sided. It felt like closure, or maybe beginning, as Emma drove back toward redemption, past the land that had changed her life. She thought about inheritance, not just money and mineral rights, but choices, consequences, chances to do things differently. Her grandfather had given her wealth, but her parents had given her compassion. Her grandmother had given her strength. The foster care system, despite its flaws, had given her resilience. Every experience, good and terrible, had shaped who she'd become. She was Emma Rodriguez. She was 21 years old. She had more money than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. And she finally knew exactly who she wanted to be. Not an oil heiress, not a tragic orphan, not a cautionary tale or a success story. Just Emma, figuring it out, making her own choices, building something worth more than money. She drove past the gas station, no longer abandoned, now full of life and laughter, and people learning, growing, becoming. She drove past the drilling site, where Apex continued extracting oil that would fund education and housing and second chances. She drove toward a future her grandfather had never imagined, but had somehow made possible by protecting something he'd never lived to see fulfilled. And in the rearview mirror, if she squinted against the setting sun, Emma could almost see Miguel standing at the gas station, finally able to rest, knowing his granddaughter had taken his gift and transformed it into something beautiful. The inheritance wasn't cursed after all. It had just been waiting for someone strong enough to carry it, and wise enough to know that some things matter more than money. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.